Barb knows what that's like.
Oh yeah. I get 3 more days and then the farm goes back on the market.
People ask me, John, how's it Johnny being retired? I said I got the tired part down.
Okay.
'Barb knows what that's like.
Oh yeah. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, just got the YouTube running. Anybody on Facebook watch the funny video I posted? Okay.
Um,
I know a couple people did. It was an assaying joke.
no, I didn't click on it. I see where it is.
Cool. Okay. Yep. And Brian disappeared again.
I wanted to mention, Barbara, that the Society of Mining Engineers had a history session, or a couple of actually mining history sessions at the Mining Exchange in Salt Lake City 2 weeks ago. There
Uh-huh.
was a wonderful presentation about a gentleman by the name of Joseph Delamare, um, who was quite a successful miner by Tim Arnold. Um, it would make a very good Nuggets or even conference presentation. I'm going to invite Tim to suggest that along for one of the meetings.
Okay. Yeah, just have them contact Mining History Association at um, Gmail.
Will do.
So if I send an email to Brian, I better keep my email client open up in case he responds. Anybody in text contact with Brian? I just have his email.
I'm not in touch with him, Barb, but I'm watching some weather here in the upper Midwest, and
He's right along the line of some very severe storms. I don't know if they're impacting him right now or not.
You in a tornado zone?
Yeah, we all are.
Okay. There's a guy on YouTube that I like to watch, and he had a live stream going. He's in Nashville, and they had a tornado siren go off, so he had to stop the live stream and go in the basement with his wife and kid. And then when he came back, there was all sorts of nasty comments from people, and it's sort of like you don't really understand what a tornado can do you?
Well, the Kankakee area south of Chicago just got clobbered by a big tornado.
Oh dear. One time we went up to our friends in Deerfield, which is on the north side of Chicago. And a couple hours after we got there, we were watching the news, and they showed this intersection where a tornado had touched down briefly. And I said, "That's the gas station we stopped at 2 hours ago." So that was kind of sobering. Ah, he's switching to another computer. So I guess the weather's okay. It's just his computer doesn't work yet. Anybody have plans for travels to mining sites this summer?
Well, Lynn tells me that we got a trip coming up to the Alma Fairplay Leadville area sometime this summer, but
Okay.
very fluid planning right now. But apparently that's the target.
Oh, okay.
I understand there might be reason to go to Pittsburgh, Kansas in the Tri-City lead zinc district. So
Hey, that's a good idea, Eric.
if only we had a guide.
I'm going up in April to visit with Kent Saylor and have him show me around some southeastern Pennsylvania coal sites.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, one of the things that I need to do is I just caught up on all the membership stuff. So tomorrow I'm going to start working on the online conference sign up. And I know they're working on the newsletter. And this year we're going to try to have both things come out at the same time. Although Chris tells me that the tours have a much higher participation number this year than last year.
You mean slots? You mean slots available?
Lots of slots available.
Okay. Yeah, I already made my.
But unfortunately, it's going to be school buses.
That's all right. I already made my airline reservation and the hotel except the last night.
Uh-huh.
Because I fly back on Monday.
Right. Are you using the KC airport?
Yeah. So I don't know if I'll stay close to the airport or I'll still be down towards Pittsburgh. I don't know yet.
Yes, for anybody planning to go, the information about the hotel is already on the website.
That's a decent price compared to Park City.
Well,
I mean, Park City was what Park City
is a
was.
bit less expensive than
It's less expensive than Park City.
Yeah, and Park City was cheap for Park City.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right. That's right.
There are other reasons that people go to Park City.
However,
on.
it's no
Go-
longer the Sundance Film Festival. That's moved to my hometown of Boulder. Wow. I am going to stay away from Boulder. They have all kinds of oh man. They've
No
got
more, no more $89 a night conference hotels.
So
uh,
Barbara, when do you think the online registration will come out? Are you talking a week or two?
a week or two.
Yeah, okay.
I haven't heard yet on the newsletter if that's ready to go yet or not. But I'm hoping to kind of synchronize the mailing of the newsletter with turning on the online registration.
Are you going to send out like an email blast? Registration is now open.
I might, because now MailChimp is making me pay $13 a month to use them for anything. So it used to be I was limited to 500 emails a month, which meant two mailings, and I use one for the Nuggets and then one for conference or whatever came up. But now I can send as many as I want.
Okay, great. Because I mean, last year there wasn't an email blast, and some people found out and other people didn't. And so, you,
That was there was some interesting communications going on amongst people that will not happen again this year. I hope.
And
Uh,
there'll be an online payment option,
oh
online
yes.
registration.
Yeah, it's the same thing as last year. I really tried hard to find a new, easier conference registration, but they were all a lot more expensive. And I've been, hey, hi Siri Leach. Is your video working now, please?
He went and grabbed his wife's computer.
Yeah. Hey. Oh, there she is getting him off.
Yeah.
Hey,
Behind every good man is a good woman.
I think we should just have Siri do the
yes, you probably
presentation.
should
You know?
give the presentation this way.
Brian married up.
That's right. Hey, thanks. Sorry, everybody. This is the third computer I think I was trying to use, so finally found one that worked. So I apologize, but I'm happy to get going anytime.
We're ready for you, Brian.
All right, here, give me one moment. I will share a screen and start chatting at you.
You guys okay with your weather there in the Quad Cities?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, we have tornadoes rolling through right now, but they are right below us. So I think we're in severe thunderstorm warning. All the worst weather is I think right below us.
We
So-
appreciate your commitment to giving a presentation.
Most important thing to do.
Could probably do it from your basement.
You probably could, yes. All right, let me see if I select the right thing to share here.
I think his tornado shelter is lead line though, and that wouldn't allow him to get a cell signal.
All right. Guys see something?
Yep. We see
Cool.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, so I mean, those of you who've heard me talk a bunch know that I've been working now far too long. I thought I was going to be done by now, but I think I'm going to be done in a couple of months now on a book that's about the portrayal of mining in American pop culture. Why am I doing this? I don't know. I think because what happened is during the pandemic, all the archives closed. And I couldn't do the normal historical research I do, and so I just use that as an excuse to watch a lot of movies. So you're gonna see the results of me spending too much time watching movies, or maybe just enough time. So let me see what I can get up here for you, and I'll talk you through this particular aspect, which ended up being kind of a fun one. I think when I first started thinking about movies and TV and music and video games and all sorts of pop culture, I think I was originally thinking about Westerns, especially, right? And then I kind of ran across a whole set, like a new genre to me of that I had encountered a fair amount of. I just hadn't really thought of kind of as a whole before of mining and really the underground as being horrific, right? And part of feelings of terror and horror. And so I'll talk through a few of these kinds of aspects here. But first off, I'll introduce one of my little core concepts, which is one that I'm kind of drawing from. There's a bunch of activists who use this term called zombie mines. And then there's been some mining historians who've used it too. John Sandlos, Arn Keeling, Tracy Bryn Voiles. I just ran across it in some work from one of the folks that we're going to see as a speaker at the Mining History Association conference in Kansas too. But this idea of zombie mines, for them, is like an idea of how an abandoned mine lives on, right? So in a lot of these cases, right, the kind of original concept was especially like a zombie mine that was like, let's say they were having kind of acid mine drainage out of it, right? Or it was uranium mines was how Tracy Bryn Voiles was using it when she was writing about uranium mining in the American West. And so this is kind of the idea that so a lot of mines will shut down, and that's fine, right? Whatever, they fill up with water and they become lakes. To give one of many examples, but obviously there's certainly some mines that live on and are undead, right? In some ways, kind of threatening places with their own toxicity. And so I kind of was playing around with this as a thought concept originally, and thought, well, there's also a way in which that captures a centuries old trope for me of mines connected with horror. And so certainly other people have done writing and thinking about mining and pop culture that talks about adventure tales or westerns and greed or coal songs and struggle. But I think this kind of idea of mining and the supernatural hasn't received as much attention. There's certainly some folklore stuff that people have talked about, but not much beyond that. But I would argue that since the 1980s, at least, especially, although maybe even before that, abandoned mines in particular have featured as the origins of evil in a lot of North American horror films. And so, certainly in terms of slasher flicks, but monster films, supernatural thrillers, so all kinds of genres within horror there. And I'd argue that they use mines for a really clear reason. I mean, they function as the border there between the natural and supernatural, right? It's that border between the underworld, right? Whatever we might think of as being hell and hellish, and our kind of human world. And I think also there's some interesting components to these mining horror films, right? They focus on working class people. Underground disasters are important, certainly both to mining history, but also to these ideas in mining films. Physical and mental degeneration, right? The idea that as you're going down below, you might become less human, right? Is a common idea in a lot of these movies. And I think some of this is also connected to I think the fact that there's been a boom in it since the 1980s has a lot to do with kind of post-industrial, I don't know, malaise or something, right? Especially as some mining communities have gone bust. And so I think that's all kind of interesting components here that I wanted to talk through. And so we'll start here in Europe. I have up a slide. Some of you will recognize what these are images of. But certainly, we have lots of kind of supernatural ideas connected to mining sites. And if you know anything about European and then eventually North American cultural traditions, you'll recognize a lot of these. So, ancient Greeks, right, have tales about the underground as a dangerous place where only the dead are allowed to travel. Christian traditions have the deep underground, right, as hell. If you behave poorly, that's where you go. The Industrial Revolution, though, connected a lot of the mining, right, and kind of industrial sites to these ideas of hell and horrific visions. Mining, of course, had long been seen, especially in Europe, as dangerous and degrading. But the Industrial Revolution encouraged, massive increases, right, in iron and coal in particular. And so European writers, if you read a lot of European writing from some of these times, right, they start here. You see a lot of repeated ideas and themes of industrialization in general, but especially mining with this underground subterranean evil. And 19th century literature continues this, right? There's underground mines as homes to spirits. One of my favorite short stories, The Mines of Fallon, by German Gothic romantic author E.T.A. Hoffmann, I think is a good example. In that tale, there's a youthful miner. He hopes to marry a beautiful Ula to make life on the surface, but he dies in a mine collapse. And the reason for the young man's death, though, is unclear in the story. But it's not clearly just a falling rock, right? But this ghostly miner named Torbern has somehow been harassing him, right? And talking him into kind of devoting himself to Mother Earth instead of to his earthly wife. Maybe to cite an even more famous example, and what you're seeing on one side of the screen here, that's a clip from one of the many editions of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings trilogy, right, where featuring the dangerous mines of Moria, this massive subterranean complex once inhabited by the Longbeard dwarves, but it's been overtaken, right, since it's been abandoned by monsters, including the fiery Balrog, who has apparently kind of emerged because the dwarves had, in their greed, excavated too deeply. So I think these are good examples. And, Europeans, of course, bring a lot of these traditions to the U.S. The Cornish myth of the Tommy knockers is a good one. Tommy knockers are supposedly small creatures who lived in the mines. They would sometimes cause mischief or disasters. There's one early origin story for Tommy knockers is even kind of anti-Semitic, right? It suggests there were spirits of Jews who've been forced to work in Roman mines. Which is curious. And the Cornish certainly especially took this tradition here to North America. There's also lots of new beliefs that kind of connect mines and horror during especially the 18th and 19th centuries. Socioeconomic class beliefs cross the Atlantic. There's a literature scholar, Mary Lesser, who talks about ways that they connected kind of like disconnected the middle class, right, from the below ground lower classes, right, and that kind of language of upper and lower classes. And that's partly because the British poor often lived and worked underground, which was a fact that kind of led a lot of people to start associating underground dwelling, right, with poverty and squalor and darkness. And miners became kind of premier representatives of this kind of almost alien creature that was so different from middle and upper classes. And so there's certainly a lot of people who have identified this as being continued, the kind of maimed bodies of these weird people who lived underground. Journalists took up this trope in the US, and I'll use one of my favorite examples here. Stephen Crane's 1894 In the Depths of a Coal Mine, which really it's this trip into Eastern Pennsylvania coal mine. But it's cast as if it's like this. He even says like a figurative descent into hell, into another world, right? He describes coal miners as ghostly apparitions. They have grotesque ghoul-like movements. So in his telling, right, this modern industrial mine wasn't just housing spirits, right, and demons. It's damaging conditions, right, were transforming the men who worked down there themselves into monsters. I would also argue that there's a developing concept in the 20th century that also kind of feeds into ways that people start thinking about abandoned mines. And that is the fact that mining communities have long suffered busts, right? Whether they're played out due to ores or volatile markets. And so by the early 20th century, you also have Americans' fascinations with abandoned places kind of joining with that era's nostalgia for a lost frontier to create this new ghost town aesthetic. Artists like Muriel Sybil Wool, these are some of her illustrations I have up here, created some of the first ghost town guidebooks for the American West. And her small Western towns, when she illustrates them, they omit a lot of the actual residents. Like, these are not truly ghost towns. They tend to often have a lot of people living in and around them, right? But they're gone, right? They're truly ghost towns in her view. She also only picked out, right, the most dilapidated buildings to try and make them look extra kind of broken down in these communities, giving the impression that a lot of these mining places are all in the past. By the 1950s and 60s, you have ghost town clubs being formed all over the West, especially cities like Denver have people who gather together and will go out. And so really you get this impression there's only ghosts and they're hunters and these crumbling buildings that are, inhabit this stark mountain landscape. All right, so I think this all starts coming together as you get a little bit more fantastical views by the middle of the 20th century. Here's a couple of fun examples, one of which I was persuaded to include from a Facebook post recently back to me. But I just was watching The Night the World Exploded a few days ago, which is a disaster movie, really, but it's kind of both sci-fi and horror. where they have found this newfound element 112, because they'd only found 111 at that point. And when this new element touches water, it explodes and it's starting to cause earthquakes around the globe. So it's a problem they have to solve. Or there's Beast from Haunted Cave, which was the suggestion to me, which is filmed in the Black Hills in South Dakota. Involves this kind of giant spider-like monster, I guess I'd call it. It attacks bank robbers in Deadwood who are trying to like they're trying to get to an underground bank vault, and to get there they go through a gold mine, and so they found an old mine to film this in, even in 1959. So these are kind of like late 50s examples of this starting to come true, although I would say that you don't get as many kind of examples that are truly exactly about abandoned mines. Eventually it's all abandoned mines by the 1980s, and I think there's a few good reasons for that. I think a lot of that has to do with the broader trends of deindustrialization across the U.S. And so, certainly starting, you're seeing in the 1960s, 70s, right, shutdowns in rubber, auto, steel. By 1982, right, we have a national recession around that. And you get this kind of peculiar post-industrial aesthetic. You get photos of demolished factories and padlocked gates and silent smokestacks. And I mean, you could even argue some of that heartland rock, Bob Seger, Bruce Springsteen, heck, even Billy Joel sometimes, right, have songs about the plight of deindustrializing communities. And so there's that kind of happening. There's also newfound concerns about pollution, right, on human health, certainly developing out of the environmental movement, but also, kind of coming to fruition with that 1980 Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act, CERCLA, right, where you have the Superfund Act is what it really is, right, to kind of clean up hazardous waste. And I would say this kind of like concern about industrial damage and health merging with these kind of concerns that heavy industries are going down. And so mining places, I think, are starting to show up as kind of representatives of like maybe symbols of these worries. Horror is kind of an obvious place often to deal with fear, big societal fears. And so I think that's one reason why you might see this. I mean, the 1980s also, right, is like a high point for horror films. You're sparked, especially by John Carpenter's 1978 Halloween. And so you get a lot of these like independent, violent slasher films that become wildly popular, despite these very modest budgets. And so I'll point out a few that are fun mining themed examples. One that I'm sure many of you have seen, My Bloody Valentine from 1981, brings forward a lot of the same themes that are in a lot of slasher movies, right? But also a lot of the themes that you see in kind of mining and horror. Particularly, right? It has a focus on working class people, unlike little. Most of these slasher films are teenagers, right? But they're actually more kind of working class, like younger people, but they're not necessarily teenagers in this movie. There's a lot of mining induced insanity in this movie, as there is in lots of the later films, right? You go in a mine too long, right? You go crazy. Economic despair, right, is kind of overarching theme. And this kind of post-industrial aesthetic. So the movie features a rundown mining town in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. Young people are going to hold a party at the abandoned mine, but where there was a mining disaster years before, right? But then they get terrorized by this villain who is kind of like half. I read one review called him half Norman Bates, half Darth Vader, right? He's wearing the mask over so that you have this deep breathing going on. And the villain uses his mining accoutrement in performing his slashing duties, right? Including his sharp pickaxe, as you can see here. The final scenes even end in the abandoned part of the mine, where the killer, who's this deranged former miner, stalks the remaining youth. The script even makes a use of a longstanding superstition that women's presence in a mine led to bad luck. There's a lot of commentary on it. Again, you see that kind of working class youth. The film's director even stated that at the time the formula was like cheap bungalow houses, sleepy suburbia, and so he was trying to bring more character to the film by using a different kind of place, not being so interchangeable as he saw it. So they shot at this recently closed mine, the Princess Mine, in Sydney Mines on Cape Breton. And they really wanted this kind of gritty town, right? And have more social consciousness, right? A feeling about jobs and hope. But the funny part is, which I'll share this story really briefly. The residents of Sydney Mines found out that they were going to film at the Princess Mine, so they showed up there and like repainted everything to make it all shiny and presentable. The filmmakers arrived in town and were like really surprised and angry about it. They spent $75,000 then remaking the pit head look dingy and gross and as it had been in its original state. They then filmed in just 7 weeks, right? Including a rather difficult shoot that was actually 2,700 feet below ground without the use of anything brighter than like a 50-watt bulb, which is pretty amazing. Because they didn't want to spark methane gas, actually. And so the real dangers of coal mining in this movie become fodder for this more fantastical view of mining warping human bodies and minds. The film's villain, Harry Warden, has been shaped into a serial killer because he had been trapped in an explosion that killed everyone else, and he had to resort to cannibalism to survive. And so his kind of mental health issues have developed out of mining, and so he comes back. And so we also learned that this site had been the death, a site of that had killed 22 miners in 1938. So it's like this long-standing pattern of death and whatnot. Anyways, it was unexpectedly popular, is the point. And so it led to a whole bunch of other kinds of movies. The Boogans is a good example of one that's much sillier, but it uses the same kind of mining disaster to drive the narrative. It starts with old newspaper clippings that describe a mysterious tragedy in a silver mine. 100 years later, the team goes and reopens this now abandoned mine, but doing so releases, of course, ravenous, scaly creatures. Again, you get young people picked off by the creatures. They're, again, not young teenagers as they are in all these other slasher films, but some of them are young minors. Some of them are just, kind of young adults. The shooting locations, again, are real mines, cabins surrounding the mines. This is actually filmed in Park City. A lot of the movie was. There's other movies. The Strangeness, which was filmed in 1980 but released in 1985, has a very similar plot. You have 7 miners. They're hired to excavate a cave that's believed to contain gold. As they make their way through the mine, there's a cave-in, so then they have to find a new exit. And then there's weird goo that starts coming in through the mine, followed by a hilarious-looking massive caterpillar-like creature. There's both men and women in that excavation team. So it's yet another film, like it gets away from the kind of suburban teenagers as its protagonists. And yet again, right, real dangers of mining as being kind of the backdrop. By the 2000s, and well, really 90s and 2000s, you have kind of an understanding of mining areas as dangerous and maybe even containing evil has now been kind of firmly linked with this belief that kind of mining places are derelict, that they're decaying, that they're abandoned, right? So you have Killer Bats of 1999's Bats. That's one that would be on the left side of your screen. They're like in this abandoned black rock mine. On John Carpenter's Ghosts of Mars, which has that's a clip, like a little shot from that. Frame from that is the evil-looking zombie guy with the knife. That mixes sci-fi and horror, right? In that film, there's miners at a remote space outpost, and they release an ancient evil force that takes over human bodies, again, by digging too deep, right? It's a very similar kind of theme. Working men and women in all of these cases, right? Not teenagers, are falling victim to the zombies. And yet again, right, you have a film that suggests that the evil lurks underground. The health consequences of mining get kind of exaggerated through the movie's grotesque zombies, but they're clearly kind of part of the story that they're trying to tell. Actually, I'll leave it up here. Eight-Legged Freaks, which has the spider that you can see in this vision. That's from 2002. That plays some of the same ideas for laughs. Perhaps unsurprising, given a lot of 90s and 2000 horror films were kind of parodies and practitioners of horror. The main character in the film, Chris McCormick, is a mining engineer. He's returned home. He's going to lead his father's company. His dad supposedly found this massive load of gold, but his dad sadly has died after the crew encountered methane gas. Others in town believe that subterranean gas drove his father crazy, and hence McCormick's father was mistaken in his claims that he had found gold. So this new guy, right, the son, leads a new investigation of the mine, although he instructs his crew to wear gas masks so that they don't repeat his father's mistakes. In the meantime, there's a nearby toxic spill that has, of course, infected spiders at an exotic spider farm. And now there's these massive spiders that retreat to the mines with their human prey, and they cocoon them to await their death. So again,
I didn't see that coming.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
didn't expect that one.
um, again, right, we have like a toxic underground, right? That's causing its own psychological, physical, even environmental damage here. The little kids that you see on your screen here is one of my favorite low budget mining horror movies, Wicked Little Things from 2006. It makes depopulated mining areas its setting. It begins with an accident, like a lot of these other movies, like My Bloody Valentine, The Boogans. In this case, you have children working in a Pennsylvania coal mine in 1913. They die in an accident because of unsafe working conditions. They're all miners, right? The children are miners. And then you go forward in time, the present day. This new family arrives, and of course, they're in the middle of nowhere, as they describe it. And the mines have long been closed, right? But the children who worked in them a century before are now undead zombies who feast on the people who stay out too late. And so the zombies here, they're flesh-eating manifestations of the mining industry's, previous poor labor and health practices, right? So we get true zombie miners, right, from the zombie mines. They eventually the situation's resolved because descendants of the original cruel mine owner, right, have to die, and then the children get released, as we'd expect. Other horror films, right, especially as we move forward further into the 2000s, make even more obvious use of true mining stories. They again are kind of really exaggerating mining's already harsh consequences here. The story of Centralia, Pennsylvania isn't particularly common, right? It made its way into at least two big budget Hollywood feature films. Right. The story of Centralia, for those who don't know it as well, right, it's a longtime anthracite coal producer. And in 1962, a fire set a municipal garbage dump on fire, and that spread into the abandoned mine tunnels. And there's still subsidence and poisonous fumes. I mean, to this day, there's a little bit in the sense that eventually they relocated. In 1983, the residents voted, I think, for a federal government buyout program, and most of them relocated. Not all of them, most of them did. And so there's a 1991 horror comedy, Nothing But Trouble, that has a couple stranded in a dilapidated old mining town with an underground on fire, much like Centralia. The 2006 film Silent Hill was not only based on a popular video game, but it's also set in its own version of Centralia. In that movie, you have a mother and daughter. They travel to this still burning mining town. They quickly discover that the decaying buildings on top are solely inhabited by these kind of cultish townsfolk. The burning underground is meanwhile populated by demons. On her first trip below ground, the mother encounters, undead miners and tar-covered demonic children. So again, right, we've got evil, insanity, the impoverished, right, all in this abandoned town here. So again, we have like serious consequences to a true environmental disaster that get transformed into a fantastical scare. You also have the return of a lot of old horror franchises. The 1977 Wes Craven film, The Hills Have Eyes, gets remade in 2006. The Hills Have Eyes 2. Those are both set in mining towns. These more recent ones, where federal nuclear tests have turned the residents of these kind of small New Mexican mining town area into cannibalistic mutants, as you might expect. So you get both kind of post 9/11 fears about disaster, as well as like ideas about mining towns as dilapidated, decaying. My Bloody Valentine then also got remade into a 3D version, of course. Another reboot, right, in 2009 that plays up the physical and mental kind of deterioration that you're getting through mining. Also filmed in a bunch of old industrial sites near Pittsburgh. Repeats a lot of the same scenes from 1981, but it's actually maybe harsher on some of the inhabitants of the town. Then I'd say in the late 2000s, early 2010s, you have news headlines, right, about a lot of mine accidents that I think make their way into a lot of films. Right, we have newsworthy explosions in West Virginia, 2006 and 2010. That kind of highly publicized mine rescue in northern Chile in 2010 too, right? You see a bunch of films that come out that have mine disasters after that. There's an independent movie from 2019, Mine 9, that has 9 Appalachian coal miners. They have to survive while trapped underground with only an hour of oxygen available. It's very exciting. 2013's Beneath, which you see here, also has a disaster at its center. It's much less realistic though. That's, it claims to be inspired by true events, although it clearly has made these events up. Um, and the filmmakers later admitted that they were merely inspired by recent news stories about people who had been trapped in mines, i.e., especially Chile would be my guess. In this film, you have a young woman who joins an inexperienced coal crew on her first trip underground. There's an unexpected collapse. They're running out of oxygen and growing in paranoia. So crew members begin to hallucinate, right? And so there's violence that breaks out. There's a body count that rises, but it's always unclear if people are just hallucinating because they're out of oxygen or if there's actually true evil and spirits going on. You also learn that 19 miners died underground in the 1920s and that they had accidentally opened that area up when they were mining, right? So again, you have like kind of filmmakers trying to keep the viewer guessing here on this. And I'll kind of finish here with a couple of even more recent 2010s films. 2012, I think, horror movies. Again, they also feature people trapped in underground mines. That becomes the most common way that this is shown in more recent horror movies. In Abandoned Mine, there's a storm that forces a group of young people, not teenagers again, they're young adults, into abandoned mine on Halloween. Of course, it's Halloween. Mind Games, which I think is even more inventive and fun, involves characters trapped in an abandoned mine. In this case, right, these young people arrive at a cabin in the woods. They suffer from nightmares. Then they discover an old mine next door. They disregard the mine closed sign next, of course, because you're going to disregard it. They enter, they explore the mine, they discover dead bodies, and then they learn there's a killer among them. And then in succession get killed or trapped underground. What's really unusual about this movie, which makes it fun, is that the entrance into the mine actually creates a time loop. And so the mine's full of this real life danger, right? One character even suddenly falls through some rotting timbers to his death. But it's also this portal, right? A portal to some sort of strange time loop hell. It's inescapable. People get killed over and over again, and then they relive those events. So again, mind games, it's kind of clever. My wordplay there. Again, I think you're seeing some of this really prefaces a return to the underground for American horror. So those people who watch things like Stranger Things or that recent It reboot from 2017, kind of similar, like underground as a source of evil, but here with mining. So again, I think my conclusion, what I would say is that you have mining pop culture. It reflects some painful realities about mining's past, right? There are certainly long-lasting environmental effects. There are health problems that have been common for miners in certain locations. There have been economic declines, right, for a lot of former mining communities. And so I think that's interesting. And I also think it's great that it reliably features, more working class characters, unlike a lot of other horror. Although maybe it's more to provide some kind of rough edged reality than for anything good in their view. But I will say that I think there might be some actual consequences that are bad for people here too, right? I mean, we exaggerate anything that could be true and real. They get, all mining places show up as decaying, right? So they're not lively places full of, live people doing cool things. I think horror is another way that we suggest that mining's part of the past and not the present, which really kind of further distances people from real mining communities. I mean, even their current problems, their possible futures, right? It's just all in the past. And I think it's tough to draw a direct line of causation, but I think it's likely that horror films just in general reinforce the stigma that mining places already face, right? And since, Americans have so few times when they actually encounter real mining, right? It's often kind of simulations of mining or, images of mining that they experience. And so I think that's maybe somewhat worrying, right? That the mining horror film may have, furthered this blurring of reality, right? You turn the mines themselves into myths, their miners become monsters, and everything is stuck in the past. So I will stop with that and stop sharing my screen so I can see all of you too.
Brian, hold it for a second.
Yeah.
What is that? The head frame picture. Where is that?
Well, those of you who know me won't be surprised to know that's a picture of Butte, Montana. That's from the top of the hill.
Okay.
That was mostly because I ran out of my favorite mine posters, and I was like, "Oh, I love that photo," so I stuck that up there.
Okay. Well, is that historic? Um, historic structures that they want to keep up, and they're just
Yeah.
dumping around it, or okay.
Yeah, those are historic structures. Yeah, that's so that's shot from the top of the hill, and you're there's a tailings pond out back behind one area. But yeah, these are all that's a lot of that is just dump area from the two open pit mines that are there. Well, I mean, one of which is not in operation at all and hasn't been in a long time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Brian.
Yeah. Well, sorry to keep everyone waiting on it, but happy to answer questions, or you can feed me more films I need to go watch, or shows, or whatever's.
Any comments? Come on, people.
Yeah, the stereotypes are interesting, and we probably have the same stereotypes against other fields of business or whatever, bankers or lawyers and doctors and all like that. But it just seems I don't see any really ever have seen a positive stereotype of mining. It's always dangerous, greedy, dark, blowing up, pollution. There's just no positive thing at all. No positive spin at all ever.
Yeah, I mean the closest I've found, because I agree. Like I've spent a lot of time trying to find some sort of. I mostly because I was trying to wrap this book up with some sort of nice, positive, fun thing. I mean, there are some stories that are kind of like the adventure of like a prospecting search, right? Which are maybe the most positive of them. Although even then, right, most of those devolve into some sort of greed or something, right? Like there's some backstory that ruins everything. So yeah, even then, it often it never trends particularly positive for most of the folks involved. So yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think almost it almost doesn't matter what genre you're in, right? You end up with a lot of very negative, and not just negative, but like very like long-standing negative tropes, and some of them are pretty bad. I mean, I think the horror movies are maybe some of the among the worst in terms of the kind of ideas and images that people get stuck with.
I like the action adventure ones where they ride mine cars underground and some fantastical thing and jumping old trestles and switching tracks and they always crash at the end, right? I mean, it's
They always
just
do.
there's a number of those, and at least those are fun. They're roller coaster rides, is really what they are.
Yeah, I'm not much of a video game person, but well, I was kind of made to be to try. People told me I all needed to play all these different mining video games, and it's amazing how many mining video games or games that just have mines or mining in them. Almost always the way that it is used is jumping in a cart so that they can go riding, because clearly they've all watched these same movies, right? So it's just Temple of Doom over and over again as people are riding around in the carts. It's pretty funny.
I changed my background because I think it's positive in Snow
Yeah,
White, right? All the
right. I think that's true.
Well, when it
Yeah.
comes to dwarves mining, there's it's more positive. There's the
Yeah.
Discord series where they've got the dwarves, and it's generally a positive outlook of the mining dwarves.
those are the
Yeah,
happiest miners I've ever seen. I mean, they're singing songs, they're having a gay old time,
that's right. They really play up the work song there. Yeah, I think that's a good point.
They're happy, they're sleepy, they're all kinds of things.
There's
Always the punster.
I think they're German metal group called Windrose who pretend that they're trolls, and their biggest song is Diggy Diggy Hole, digging a hole. And it's something to watch the concerts because you got 20,000 metalheads out there all singing about digging holes.
Oh, of course. That's pretty funny.
So you were kind of focused in this presentation on a particular aspect of this. Do you have other chapters in the book or a broader analysis of those other movies? I mean, you mentioned Westerns at the beginning, and
Mhm.
I did that short piece years ago, just kind of picking up clips here
Right.
and there. And obviously, depictions of mining are all over in the movies. I like what you did with this one, but just wondered where else you're going and what we should expect to see when the bestseller comes out.
Um, I plan to sell tens of copies. Um, yeah, yeah. So yeah. I mean, I mentioned. I mean, I think westerns are where I started. And so yeah, there was a chapter indeed about westerns, mostly as you might expect, westerns, greed, and kind of portrayals of like mining barons, as kind of robber baron version. So there's a chapter on that. There's uh, kind of a chapter on coal songs and movies.
Hmm.
Um, so so that was a lot of fun. And that's another one that I'm talking a lot about. Again, there you've got kind of class consciousness and poverty, and a lot of issues kind of get embodied. But also actually a fairly grim reality, and a lot of those. I mean, although it's very deeply sentimental and nostalgic, I think actually still trends negative in a lot of those cases. Um, I'm talking about video games. I have a little section on video games, things like Minecraft, ways that people think about mining as being uh, like a form of play. So I have a little section on that. I have similarly another. I think I presented on this at the last MHA meeting. The other game I talk a little bit about board games. So there's a little section on board games that feature minerals and mining, and that kind of minerals as economic trades. Trying to think what else I do. Um, there's sci-fi. I have a science fiction and chapter. Kind of uh, what I posit there is essentially that the more extreme environments make people have even more extremely bad opinions about mining. Um, and especially mining, I think they kind of replay a lot of what they see as some of mining's worst past in kind of future environments. So I do have some sci-fi stuff in there. I don't know. I'm sure I'm missing other things. This is one of these books where I kept thinking I was done, and then I kept writing a new chapter. So I'm sure there's other chapters I've already forgotten about. But just to give you a sense, yeah, a lot of it is based, especially around movies, but there's also again games. There's TV. I have a chapter on reality television shows, which are some of my favorite examples of of kind of ways that mining shows up in TV. And maybe actually in some ways, a lot of those are maybe more positive now that I think about it. Those are very kind of like a lot of the discussion there is adventure for fun, right? Or sometimes goofing around if you think about some of the ways that some of those mining shows play out. So yeah, so I think that covers a wide swath of things with a general idea that um, I mean, one of my main arguments here is that mining gets stuck in the past, which, you know, as a historian, you might think is a good thing. But I think it also means that it's a little bit harder because people always think about mining as being part of this past because that's the way it always appears in pop culture. I don't think they think
Mhm.
about it very much in the present or in the future, right? That it might have other roles and that mining places too have a present and a future. As I was trying to point out in this presentation, that I think gets forgotten about in a lot of this culture.
Interesting thing is when you talk about reality TV, at least that brings in some of the pranks and joking around that really does happen in the mining
Yeah.
industry. People get nicknames, people almost get hurt,
Yep.
things go wrong, and those things really happen. And people joke for I mean, the way they treat the new guy, you know, and things like that. But when you think about it, if mining is addressed this way, no one ever talks about smelting.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's just sort of a forgotten thing, or you know, it's somehow I guess we mine the ores, they automatically become the final product. But there's no one like
Yeah.
no reality TV or anything on smelting, you know, or running an iron furnace or anything like that. It's just it's I guess not interesting. But to think of the thousands and tens of thousands of people employed in those industries who were real people, and they things went wrong and someone came over and helped you make it right and fix it, and you worked together and you felt good at the end of the day because you were productive, and then the next day you came in, it was that same old mundane thing until the next breakdown or whatever. I mean, so at least the reality stuff brings in some of the stuff that happens. It's not so fantastic. I mean, they always focus on the entertaining part, not the boring mundane. Who would watch the boring mundane?
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think there's probably more movies about librarians than smelting works.
I think there might be, Eric. Have you seen what is that like action-y adventure, The Librarian? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, TV show. There's the three
TV
movies
show.
and then TV shows. Yeah,
Yeah.
the secret
Okay,
library of it was actually the movies were quite enjoyable.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
If
I
you
think
want
good
if
point,
you
Tony.
want a seriously forgettable Johnny Depp movie, watch Dead Man, which was filmed in the Crown Point Mill on the Comstock.
Did you watch that today?
Yeah, that's a good example. Yeah, it's been a while since I watched that.
Yeah, librarians are people too, Eric.
They really are.
Any other comments, questions?
Hey, Jeff Schramm here. That was great, Brian, or really
Thanks,
good
Jeff.
stuff. I'm curious to know a little bit more about the sci-fi angle. I was just thinking about, especially, I'm a big Doctor Who fan, and minds are portrayed very differently in classic Doctor Who. Of course, that's very British, and the British mining tradition kind of shows up in some of the old classic Doctor Who episodes. And mining is a bit more positive. It's not necessarily always in the past, although you do see it kind of that same sort of declensionist narrative. But there are future miners in there doing a good job mining, but it's still very much a working class sort of thing. But great stuff. I'm really looking forward to reading this.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, the sci-fi has been interesting in the sense that most of the like mining kind of emerges as a common science fiction trope. I kind of, really in the 70s, 70s, 80s. I think it's kind of almost accompanied with especially environmental movement, and so I see a lot of that stuff. I think became extra declensionist, like it's almost seen in that same way, right? A lot of the times when you run into the mines in science fiction, right, they end up being almost even worse, right, in that sci-fi sense. On the other hand, I will say outside of the mines, the minerals, right, like the kind of like the amazing mine substances, right, of there's like these magical minerals, right, that can do 1 million amazing things, your dilithium crystals, your whatever, right, that you can power massive ships with these like tiny things. And I do think that that's really interesting, right, that there's unobtainium and stuff like that.
You just have to butt in.
I have one comment. One of the things that is mining presented in a truly heroic nature in older media is the Lone Ranger, because he is the survivor of this massacre and gets his own silver mine where he mines his own silver to make bullets using silver because it flies truer and more accurately. In the entire series, there's practically nothing where he doesn't actually pull out a bullet and give it to somebody as a souvenir of having dealt with the Lone Ranger.
That's a great example. That's cool. Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that.
Brian, in the sci-fi context, I think there's a general theme that a lot of mining occurs off the planet, here, there, and everywhere, and oftentimes those mining colonies are depicted as pretty grim places.
often staffed with convicts and so on and so forth.
Yep.
The other thing I was going to put you onto, if you haven't thought about it, this is very lighthearted. If you remember the old Rocky and Bullwinkle show, they had a whole series with Captain Wrongway Peach Fuzz in search of the mine for upsidasium, which was an element that defied gravity. Upsidasium.
That's great. I admit I have not spent enough time with Captain Peach Fuzz, so clearly will be next. That's funny.
May not want to report that to your chair.
I think everyone I work with already thinks I'm crazy. So that's and correctly.
I'm trying to remember. Wasn't there a mining scene in Galaxy Quest? Isn't that where they go to get the beryllium spheres?
Yeah, there's these like monster, like kind of these little aliens that are very have these sharp teeth. Like they look cute and then they show up and they have these sharp teeth.
That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of both playing on the we need this one magical mineral wherever it is, right, to power the ship, and the kind of horror coming out of the mine at the same time. Yeah, I think it connects those themes pretty well.
Great work, Brian.
Thanks, Eric.
I'll look forward to seeing you in Kansas and buying several copies of the book. So,
all right.
Okay. Well, thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Next month, we will leave the United States and go over to India for footprints of ancient mining and smelting. Hey, we've got smelting coming up.
Yeah.
Heritage in medieval India. So hope you all return for that. And we will see you next week, and then see you at the end of May in Pittsburgh. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Good to see everybody.
Good night, all.